Hi everyone, I am a psychology student at master's level in psychotherapy, and today I will be reacting to a new type of videos that is related to what I studied for my master's thesis in psychotherapy and psychopathology. My subject was muscle dysmorphia. So this first video comes from BBC. I expect it's going to be focusing on one person and their experience with muscle dysmorphia. So let's watch it and see what I have to say.
I am my own critic. I have very high expectations of myself. You get so obsessed by the thought of eating, sleeping, training. I want perfection. That's what I go after.
When did you first realise you had muscle dysmorphia?
I wasn't happy when I trained. It was continual negative thoughts even as I trained. If I couldn't get that one extra rep, I would hit myself again.
Having lived with the condition for more than 6 years,
he expressed a little bit of distress regarding his training, going into the direction of a certain level of distress, but there's so much missing to really be suffering from muscle dysmorphia. I'm a little bit skeptical on exactly what we're talking about. I hope that we get more information from this man about exactly how he feels, what makes him suffer, does he suffer, to what degree, what about. I hope we get a little bit more of that data coming from him, so let's keep watching.
How often do you go to the gym?
About 5 or 6 days a week.
And what were some of the symptoms which made you realise you had bigorexia?
I would wake up and all I would think was eat, sleep, train. While I was in uni, while I was going to bed, while I was out socializing, all I would care was, am I eating my meals on time?
Men like...
Okay, so we got a little bit of information, and this one was much more interesting. So he expressed that he was quite obsessed with his training and his diet, and at night he would think about it, so maybe it even disturbed his sleep. He would think about it in uni, and so it was very much on his mind. And the way he says it, it sounds like it was a strong preoccupation and a strong obsession. This is very relevant because muscle dysmorphia is one of the conceptualizations is that this is an OCD-related disorder. So it's related to compulsion and obsessions. And he just expressed obsessions. Obsessions are thoughts that are intrusive, that you don't really want to have, and they come to your mind anyway, at a rate, at a frequency, at an intensity that is distressing and that you really don't want to have, and yet you cannot help it. And that's more or less what he expressed, although we didn't go much deeper into it. He also expressed elements of obsession. Obsession is related to behavior, so we have two sides of the same coin. We have compulsion and obsession. Obsession is related to thoughts or cognitions, and compulsion is related to behavior, which is the things that I actually do. He expressed the frequency of his training, which is from 4 to 6 days, which is quite normal, really, and average. And he didn't express particularly that this was too much for him. He didn't express that this was distressing or that this was impacting his life negatively. Maybe he really likes to train 6 days a week, and this makes his life more enjoyable and makes him happier. So when you judge compulsion, you cannot judge the frequency as if it was an objective measure that you could put on a scale. You have to associate it with how the person feels about this frequency. So for example, it's very possible that this man is training 6 days a week, and if you ask him, okay, is this too much for you? Are you suffering from this? He would say, no, I like it. This is perfectly fine for me. It suits my schedule. It makes me happy. I look forward to it, and it's fine. And on the other hand, you might have someone that says, I train 3 days a week, and it's way too much. It completely destroys my schedule for my work, for my socialization, for the time that I have alone for my other hobbies. So I really want to make this point that compulsion is not related to some kind of absolute frequency threshold, and instead it's related to how the person feels about this frequency and the consequences that it has on their life and on their well-being. And we haven't particularly heard that this high frequency was negatively impacting his life or his well-being. So we got a good sense of suffering from the obsession, but not so much for the compulsion, which points us in the direction of, yeah, maybe he's suffering a little bit, but we are still missing, I would say, quite a bit of data to make a conclusion that he is suffering from muscle dysmorphia to a significant extent. So let's keep watching.
Pradeep, who take their training incredibly seriously, are likely to have heard of bigorexia, but many come across the condition online and often diagnose themselves.
And it's images of the so-called perfect body within the media, which therapists say is driving their condition.
There's much more pressure on men to have a six-pack and to be muscled, although that's been around for women for quite a long time, pressures in magazines and in adverts and so on. And it might actually be that women maybe have actually adjusted a little bit and become better prepared than men to deal with all these images and these pressures.
I get along.
Sarah Loynes.
So we are starting to question where those muscle dysmorphia come from, what causes it. And generally speaking, in psychology, it can be quite hard to pinpoint where does something come from, what causes it. And especially when you get to cultural context, it's even harder to really pinpoint why it's happening. This is a relatively common hypothesis that the rise in muscle dysmorphia comes from the rise in hypermasculine body images for men. You can see it in the literature frequently. I would say that there are many other possible reasons that can coexist with the cultural reasons. So we might have these cultural reasons that may be valid. In fact, I would say it probably is valid, but we don't know to what extent it is responsible for the rise in muscle dysmorphia. So for example, maybe it's responsible to a 30% degree, and we have 70 other percent that come from individual factors or environmental factors such as your family, social groups, etc. In the research, this is quite unclear still.
Believes her son Ollie had bigorexia, and it ended up taking over his life. Ollie started taking dangerous amounts of steroids to try and get bigger. Despite suffering 2 heart attacks and a stroke, he continued working out. Ollie had a 3rd heart attack at the age of 20. This time, it killed him.
Still miss him now, still talk about it. There's not a day that goes by where we don't mention Ollie's name.
So this is a much more convincing case of severe muscle dysmorphia. So this young man was suffering from muscle dysmorphia, and we learned that despite having suffered from heart attacks, he kept on following a steroids protocol that eventually led to a last heart attack where unfortunately he died. So this is an actual criteria for muscle dysmorphia. It's one of many, and it is related to the fact that you keep on doing something that is dangerous for your health and puts you at risk despite knowing the risk. And so in this case, it's quite obvious that he knew the risk because he already suffered from heart attacks, and yet he kept on doing it, and eventually, of course, it led to his death. So I would say that just based on this one data point, it is so extreme and to such a high degree of intensity that it is quite clear that this man on the screen was probably suffering from muscle dysmorphia. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.